Let's start with one of the most important fossils ever discovered, Archaeopteryx. At first glance, it looks like a bird. It had feathers, wings, and even a wishbone, similar to modern birds. Case closed, right? Not exactly, because the fossil also had teeth, sharp claws on its wings, and a long, bony tail like a dinosaur. When this fossil was discovered in Germany in 1861, scientists couldn't believe what they were seeing. Was it a bird, or was it a dinosaur? The answer turned out to be both. Archaeopteryx became one of the strongest pieces of evidence that birds evolved from dinosaurs, a discovery that completely changed how scientists viewed evolution. Today, it sits as one of the most famous transitional fossils ever found, proving that nature doesn't always make sudden jumps. Sometimes, it changes one small step at a time. For over a century, movies, books, and museums all showed dinosaurs the same way, covered in rough, scaly skin. Then, in 1996, a fossil discovered in China changed everything. Meet Sinosauropteryx. At first, scientists noticed strange fuzzy markings surrounding the skeleton. Some people thought they were just damaged skin. Others believed they were the remains of plants. But after careful study, researchers realized something incredible. Those fuzzy structures were primitive feathers. For the first time, scientists had undeniable evidence that some dinosaurs were feathered. And the surprises didn't stop there. Microscopic pigment structures preserved inside the fossil even revealed its color pattern. Sinosauropteryx likely had a reddish-brown body with a striped tail. It wasn't just another dinosaur anymore. It became one of the first dinosaur scientists could actually color accurately. One fossil transformed dinosaurs from giant reptiles into far more bird-like animals than anyone had imagined. Now imagine discovering a fossil. That completely changes what scientists thought an entire group of animals could do. Meet Dinocephalosaurus, a strange long-necked marine reptile that lived around 245 million years ago. For decades, scientists assumed reptiles like this laid eggs. After all, that's what reptiles usually do. But then, researchers examined one extraordinary fossil. Inside the mother's body, they found something incredible. An embryo, not an egg. An unborn baby. At first, scientists had to make sure it wasn't simply another animal the mother had eaten. But after careful study, the tiny skeleton was positioned exactly like a developing baby. There was no doubt Dinocephalosaurus was giving birth to live young. That single fossil completely changed what scientists believed about these ancient marine reptiles. It also revealed something even more fascinating. Giving birth to live babies meant these reptiles no longer needed to crawl onto land to reproduce. They could spend their entire lives in the ocean. One fossil didn't just reveal how an animal reproduced. It revealed an entirely new way of life. Sometimes, the biggest scientific discoveries come from the smallest skeletons. Most dinosaur fossils are exactly what you'd expect. Bones. Lots of bones. But in 2011, workers digging in a Canadian oil mine uncovered something almost impossible. A dinosaur so perfectly preserved, it looked like it had died only yesterday. Meet Borealopelta, a heavily armored dinosaur covered in massive spikes. When paleontologists examined the fossil, they couldn't believe their eyes. The skin was still preserved, the armor was still attached. Even tiny details of its scales had survived for over 110 million years. But the biggest surprise came under the microscope. Scientists discovered traces of pigment. For the first time, they could begin reconstructing the dinosaur's real colors instead of gray or green. Evidence suggested Borealopelta had a reddish-brown body, a color that may have helped it blend into its environment. And despite its enormous armor, that coloration suggested something unexpected. It was still trying to avoid predators, which meant even this living tank feared something larger. One beautifully preserved fossil transformed Borealopelta from a pile of bones into a real animal with skin, color, and a place in its ancient ecosystem. Sometimes, a fossil doesn't just show us what an animal looked like, it lets us meet it. Imagine walking across the desert and finding two dinosaurs frozen in the middle of a fight, not standing side by side, not buried separately, actually fighting. That's exactly what scientists discovered in Mongolia in 1971. One fossil preserved a fierce battle between a velociraptor and a protoceratops. Even after more than 70 million years, the evidence was still there. The velociraptor's curved sickle claw was buried deep inside the protoceratops. Meanwhile, The Protoceratops had clamped its powerful beak tightly onto the predator's arm. Neither animal escaped. Scientists believe a collapsing sand dune may have buried both dinosaurs within seconds, preserving their final battle forever. Before this discovery, scientists could only guess how many dinosaurs hunted or defended themselves. But this fossil wasn't a theory. It was direct evidence. A real prehistoric fight, captured at the exact moment it happened. Today, it's one of the most dramatic fossils ever discovered because it reminds us that fossils don't just preserve bones. Sometimes they preserve the final moments of life itself. Now imagine discovering a fossil that captured one of the most important moments in any animal's life: birth. Meet Ichthyosaurus, a dolphin-shaped marine reptile that ruled the oceans during the age of dinosaurs. For years, scientists wondered how these reptiles reproduced. Did they crawl onto beaches like sea turtles? Or did they stay in the water? Then came an extraordinary fossil. Inside the skeleton of one adult, researchers found tiny baby ichthyosaurs. One was still safely inside the mother's body, another was halfway out, and a third had already been born. It was a snapshot of birth, frozen for nearly 180 million years. This incredible discovery proved that ichthyosaurs gave birth to live young in the ocean. They never needed to return to land. Instead, they spent their entire lives at sea, from the moment they were born to the day they died. It's one of the rarest fossil discoveries ever made, not because it shows an ancient animal, but because it captured an ancient moment, a moment that lasted only minutes, yet survived for hundreds of millions of years. Finding a giant shark tooth is already exciting, but what if that tooth belonged to a baby? That simple discovery led scientists to one of the biggest surprises in Megalodon's history. For years, nobody knew where young Megalodon spent the first years of their lives. The open ocean was full of giant predators. A newborn shark wouldn't stand much of a chance. Then paleontologists began finding something unusual: large numbers of small Megalodon teeth, all in the same ancient coastal locations. The teeth were clearly from young sharks, not fully grown adults. After comparing fossils from around the world, scientists reached an incredible conclusion. These shallow coastal waters had once been Megalodon nurseries, safe places where baby sharks could grow before venturing into the open ocean. It's a strategy used by many modern sharks today, which means one of history's largest predators may have raised its young in much the same way. A handful of fossil teeth completely changed how scientists imagined the life of Megalodon, not just as a terrifying hunter, but as an animal with a life cycle surprisingly similar to sharks swimming in our oceans today. For a long time, scientists imagined dinosaurs as cold, distant animals. They laid their eggs, then walked away. At least, that's what everyone believed. Then came one remarkable discovery: hundreds of dinosaur nests, eggs, tiny skeletons, and even young dinosaurs that were still growing, all belonging to a plant-eating dinosaur called Maiasaura. Its name means good mother lizard. And after seeing the fossils, it's easy to understand why. The babies were far too young to leave the nest, yet their bones showed they had continued growing after hatching. That meant they weren't surviving on their own. Someone had to be feeding them. The only possible answer was their parents. For the first time, scientists had strong evidence that at least some dinosaurs cared for their young. They built nests, protected their babies, and likely returned with food until the young were old enough to survive. That single nesting site completely changed the way dinosaurs were viewed. They weren't simply giant reptiles wandering the landscape. Some were caring parents, and in many ways, they behaved far more like modern birds than anyone had imagined. One fossil site rewrote the story of dinosaur family life. By now, you've probably noticed a pattern. The biggest fossil discoveries aren't always the biggest skeletons. Sometimes, they're hidden inside the bones themselves. In 2005, scientists made a discovery that sounded almost impossible. While studying the fossilized leg bone of a Tyrannosaurus rex, researchers found something unexpected: soft tissue. Not solid rock, not just fossilized bone, but flexible structures that looked remarkably like blood vessels. When the fossil was carefully examined, scientists even found cells and proteins preserved inside. At first, many researchers were skeptical. How could soft tissue survive for around 68 million years? For decades, scientists believed it couldn't. The discovery sparked one of the biggest debates in paleontology. As more fossils were studied, researchers found similar preserved tissues in other ancient animals. It didn't mean dinosaur flesh had somehow survived untouched, but it proved that under extremely rare conditions, tiny biological structures could last far longer than anyone had imagined. One fossil forced scientists to rethink how fossils form, how they are preserved, and what incredible secrets might still be hiding inside ancient bones. Sometimes, the greatest discovery isn't what you can see, it's what's been hiding inside all along. Now, imagine finding a snake with legs. It sounds impossible, but that's exactly what scientists discovered. Meet Najash, an ancient snake that lived around 95 million years ago. Unlike modern snakes, Najash still had small but fully formed hind legs, not tiny bones hidden inside its body. Real legs, complete with hips and ankles. For years, scientists debated one of evolution's biggest mysteries. Where did snakes come from? Did they evolve from animals that swam in the ocean, or from reptiles that lived on land? Then, Najash helped provide the answer. Its skeleton showed clear adaptations for life on land, meaning the earliest snakes likely evolved from terrestrial lizards, not marine reptiles. That single fossil didn't just reveal what an ancient snake looked like, it helped solve one of evolution's longest-running mysteries. Today, when you look at a modern snake, you're seeing the result of millions of years of evolution. And thanks to Najash, we now know that long ago, their ancestors once walked on legs. One fossil completely changed the story of how snakes evolved. The next time you see a fossil in a museum, remember, you're not just looking at an old bone, you're looking at evidence. Evidence of worlds that no longer exist. Animals that changed our understanding of evolution, and discoveries that completely rewrote science. The amazing part is, we haven't found everything every year. Paleontologists uncover new fossils hidden beneath deserts, mountains, forests, and oceans. Some confirm what we already know. Others reveal something nobody ever expected, which means somewhere beneath your feet. There could be another fossil waiting to be discovered, a fossil that could answer one of science's biggest mysteries, or create an entirely new one. Because Earth's history isn't a finished story. With every new discovery, another chapter is written, and somehow, the truth is always more unbelievable than fiction.